Hello, everyone, and welcome to my daily journal. My name is Alicia. I'm here meeting my sister-in-law Leah, who's married to my brother, who is currently in the army. He was drafted. Hillel, my brother, and I are very close, and he and his wife and their three kids live in Lod, which is a town where there's a large Arab population as well, Israeli Arabs. So that that mix also creates an interesting dynamic in the city. And I wanted us to meet and talk and hear from Leah both what it's like to be married to a active soldier, and also what the situation is like on the ground, like in these cities. And a few years back, there was um, a lot of violence in the mixed cities, as when the IDF was in another operation in Gaza. So I wanted to hear more about that. Um, Before we start, let me just point out today is November 8th. So we're talking, this is the 33rd day of the war that began October 7th. And yeah, our troops are currently in Gaza. My brother, just for the record, is currently not in active combat. He's waiting in reserve in case they need to be called up to either of the main fronts we have, north and south. But still, having a family and not knowing when they might, at a drop of a hat, be called up. That's its own task, and definitely, some of the real heroes are the parents of the people of the kids, and that stay back and try to keep life intact for when the soldiers come home. So yeah, with all that long introduction, Leah, if you want to add anything to my intro, go ahead. Sure, yeah. Um, so yeah, so tell me, so if you can tell us a little bit about what it was like. Hillel was called up. First of all, I mean, maybe we can start even before these events. Hillel is now 42 years old, right? Uh, 40, right? Sorry, 40 years old. Sorry, my mistake. Yeah, I did the wrong math in my mind. And he actually could have not been drafted, right? Yeah. So they basically volunteered, right, to stay in the army, even though they passed a certain age. So how was that? I'll ask Hillel how that was for him, but I'm curious how that was for you. For when Hillel decided to stay around, and what was that like? And do you regret it looking back?
You say when Hillel decided, what was that like for me when Hillel decided? And it's not at all how it went down. So I'll just tell you that first of all, Hillel did like you did Hezbollah, which means or you want to explain what Hezbollah is for those
It
who
just
don't
means
know.
that in Israel,
Um,
there's everybody has to go. Every able-bodied male, at least, has to go to the army, unless they have special circumstances. And the Hesder program is one in which you go for a longer stretch of time, but you mix in studies in a yeshiva and an institution for higher Jewish learning, um, um, into the program. So instead of being 3 years, it's 5 years at the
yeah.
bare minimum.
So in this case, I guess the perk of that was that he was enlisted initially when he was 20, with his friends from yeshiva that he was living with. And uh, he lucked out, and I don't think most people do, to continue doing reserve duty with some of his best friends. And so it's a group of guys he's known for 20 years, for more than 20 years, and he served with them from the beginning. So um, whenever he'd get called up for reserves, it was, meeting the guys and, you know, hanging out in the dirt and with guns um, and serving the country, right? But it wasn't. a lot of guys I know, they go and they serve, but they don't have much opportunity to enjoy um, the company or enjoy the work that you're doing in the army. And I think Hillel and for me also was very fortunate that his reserve duty was with his buddies. And he, I think, enjoyed being in the army and doing the work, and he's good at it. So for me, as um, as a religious girl who didn't go to the army, and I don't have brothers, to know that my husband is doing that very, very important, noble, patriotic work and serving the country is a huge honor. And so for me, there was no question that he would always go, and I encouraged that, and I knew that I would rise to the occasion, and that our kids would know that this is what we do, and to set an example for that.
Moving to live in Lod,
Yeah.
that also seems to be something that's driven by some sense of ideals, right? Of trying to
Mm-hmm.
help the country. So maybe you can
Mm-hmm.
tell us a little bit about that decision as
Sure.
well.
Sure. So, you mentioned that Lod is a mixed city of Jews and Arabs, and that actually wasn't the reason we came to Lod. And I think that's actually an interesting concept, because many times people um, very much frown upon the Jewish religious community in Lod, because we're seen as trying to be ideological, settlers and trying to push the Arabs out. And um, it really had nothing to do with that, but rather that it's a city that's very diverse in terms of the Jews that are here. And part of that has to do with the dynamic with the Arabs, as in there are neighborhoods here that were used to be primarily Jewish, and we know this for a fact because of the amount of shuls that are in the neighborhoods that are now
Synagogues.
empty. The synagogue, yeah. Um, and what was happening in the city was that um, the another point is many of the Israeli Arabs that live here, and the issues with them have been very related to crime. So the city went through a whole renewal over the past 10 years or so since we moved here. Um, and we came to Lod mostly because we wanted to be um, in a diverse environment. We wanted to have a strong community, which there is here. And we wanted to be, by virtue of being here, feeling like we're making a difference. We're contributing, because by nature, we're not people that like go out and do stuff. It's like it has to come to our doorstep in order for us to like have the energy to like, turn off Netflix and do something. So it was very important for us that we to be contributing, and we knew that we needed to do that in a way that was easy for us. So that was like the missing piece in our lifestyle. And coming to Lod, where the community is a very tight knit community and is very, very active in terms of all types of charity work or just being part of a very diverse city. And there's a lot of interesting things going on here in terms socially, in terms of the community, in terms of the different layers of society in Israel, um, and that was mainly why we came
Yeah. Yeah.
to yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. So then let's talk a little bit about, the experience of like the first I think for me at least, the war so far, which has been going on for a bit over a month, um, can be divided into roughly two, maybe three portions. I think that the
Mm-hmm.
first section for me was just the first few days when there was so much uncertainty in the air as to what is happening. Then there was this part that led up to the operation in Gaza, where the forces were getting
Mm-hmm.
ready and amassing, and we had stabilized the border, but it was still, very unclear how far we would go with trying to address this. I felt at least at that point already safe on a tactical level, but on a strategic level, I really had no idea, what we would do. Would we actually go through with what we're saying we're going to go through, and what does that mean for our soldiers and for our security? And then since then, as Israel has been going in and doing what it's doing in Gaza, where there's a sense of at least some motion. It's not all just like pent up, concern. Um, I'm curious if that's also how you've experienced it, especially since you have Hillel there and in
Yeah.
the field, and maybe you're still in that second phase where you're not sure if
What's
he's any
happening?
moment going to be called in, and you're like thinking of it all the time.
Um, so definitely the first phase. Hillel was called up at 4:30 in the morning, um, and we thought it would take a few weeks to do before he was called up, and then he was just called up that very night, um, on 4:30 in the morning on the 8th of October. So it hadn't even been 24 hours, and we had to get it together really quickly. Not, obviously packing his bag and all of his gear and stuff like that, but also figuring out how we're going to cope and what we're going to tell the kids. And Hillel is a very, very hands-on, involved father and husband and
Oh yes.
housekeeper. And so, I mean, part of being going to reserve duty once every year or two meant that I pick up all those pieces and I do it for, whatever it is, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. But here there was a lot of unknown. So there was, just logistic stuff, but mostly. So that was sort of like where my mind goes automatically, because it's like, okay, I'm in survival mode. You don't really give, um, I didn't have a moment to like process anything emotionally. Um, but
Yeah, I think that that's
yeah,
something very. I think that that's something that's very much related to being a parent. Also, it's not. It's that's
definitely.
in a sense you even. It's true that some people tend more towards thinking about logistics than others, but I think when you're a parent, that is almost the number one thing that goes into your mind. Like, okay, my kids have to keep on living normally. How do I
Yeah,
help them live normally under these conditions?
yeah, and definitely Corona was a good prep for how do we survive this, because the kids didn't have school. And so we basically reverted back to our Corona routine of, what the day looks like, what do we eat for lunch, what's the rhythm of things in the house, that had already been established. So that was, in a way, helpful. But I think the first week I was basically dissociating. Most of the time, I was putting on a good face for the kids. They were not stressed, and I kept thinking about that movie, the Italian movie, Life is Beautiful, about the Holocaust. And at the time, I remember it was controversial. Like, how could you, um, uh, people saw it as like belittling the Holocaust. And I was like, you know what? That's what I want to be doing for my kids. I want them to think that we're just going through this phase and it's all good. Um, and definitely the first week, I stayed away from the news completely. So I didn't really know. I heard atrocities. I had no clue what the details were. So that was helpful.
And in your community, were a lot of people called up?
Oh, yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Definitely. We live in a community that, basically the age range of the parents, um, are, 50 and under. So most families, either the husband was called up or the sons were called up, depending on where they are. The whole neighborhood are people that serve. So I don't think there's a family who doesn't have a father, a son, a brother, a cousin. I mean, a cousin for sure. But so in our neighborhood, especially in the shul that we go to, where we're one of the oldest ones there, I would say over half the women um, are home without their husbands right now, if not more. It's probably close to 60 or 70%. And then there are some women whose husbands are in what's it called, in keva, or
Yeah,
serve
they're
in
regular
places where they
army,
come home every
not
day.
reserve.
Um, exactly. So yes, a lot of people, more than 50%, are called up in our little neighborhood.
Yeah. So a few years back in Lod,
Mm-hmm.
where you live, there was during another operation. I think it was
Mm-hmm.
2019. I think, or 2020
This
was
two and a
no,
half years ago,
yeah,
21.
2021. There was
Mm-hmm.
another military operation, and what made that specific operation very different from other ones was that there was a very large and violent uprising within the Israeli Arabs, like the Arabs that live within
Mm-hmm.
Israel.
Yep.
One of the concerns that Israel had when this operation started was that something similar would happen, that there would be, um, in addition to fighting in Gaza, that the security forces would have to also deal with, strife within the country. And overall, I have to say that that has not happened. For the most part, maybe a few small things here and there. I was
Right.
curious what it's like on the ground in Lod. I mean, when that happened in 2021, you guys were, you felt at some point very defenseless, perhaps a bit the way that the people in the South felt in this period, though, of course, much less intense than what they went through. But what has it been like? What was it like then, and what is it like now? I think that people abroad should understand some of the complexities of having an Israeli Arab population within Israel,
Mm-hmm.
trying to live peacefully with them, but also
Mm-hmm.
worrying that something might happen, and that worry is not just a abstraction. It's a very
Mm-hmm.
concrete living memory. So, how was it
Right.
then, and how is it now?
Okay, so that's a good question. Um, Lud, for the most part, has been over the years a mostly peaceful coexistence between Jews and Arabs. I wouldn't say that there's a lot of close neighborly affection for the most part, but there is coexistence next to each other, and people shop at each other's stores. But it is clear who's Arab and who's Jewish, um, and people are it's amicable. Um, Most of the issues that happen in the city have to do with just crime and crime families, which are very common here in the Arab population, and that's a big issue, and that's very well spoken about. There was some coexistence. There was especially in one neighborhood here, which is very mixed. Some neighborhoods are more mixed, Jewish and Arab, than others in the city. And there they had a community center, a matnas, that was run by Jews and Arabs together, and they had activities that were together. And there was a lot of work on that coexistence, that togetherness, that mutual understanding, um, and what happened in the rioting in May of 2021 was that the Arabs in the city basically were rioting in the streets against the Jews. And I distinctly remember one story that we heard from the neighbors was that one of the people that was in this community center and was stuck in there and couldn't get out because of the rioting on the street. At some point, did try to get out, and he was starting to get lynched. And then one of the rioters was like, "Oh, no, 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 I know him. You can let him go." And it was a coworker from the community center that he worked with. So he got out of it because the person that was rioting knew him. But that broke the trust for the Jews here that were really investing, and there was a lot of investment on the Jewish side to try to have a real coexistence where our children can go to the same activities in the afternoon, where we can coexist and live in one building and play in the same playground and do all that stuff. And overnight, the Jews were not safe here. And so that's
what happened back then, and
what happened, right. So what happened back then, so that was one aspect of it, of this hope for coexistence that was debunked, basically.
Right.
The second aspect of that, and I'll revert back to why I'm telling you all this, was that the police did not get involved in the rioting here, which led to an Arab getting killed because they were rioting up the street, and someone shot into the air and someone got killed. And literally, we saw the shooting in front of out of the window. Like, we saw the flares of light. We heard them. I could hear them from the window. And the police, we'd call the police, and they were like, yes, we know. And they would not come to protect us. One of the neighbors was stabbed a street away from here, next to his house, and called the police, and the police said they couldn't come to help him. He wound up calling his wife, who sent the neighbor, and the neighbor went to rescue him, which shows you how much we need our military men at home. So what happened at the time was the police was not coming. That literally the police station is up the street from here. They didn't come to help, which sounds crazy. And when we heard the testimonies or saw the people in Be'eri calling for help, waiting for the police to come, and they didn't come, that was a deja vu for us, because we also were calling for the police to come, and they're literally up the street. They can see what's happening. It's happening in front of the police station.
Right.
And they're not coming because they can't get involved. So in Be'eri was for what other reasons, but the sense of like, what the heck? Why do we have a police? Like, they literally would not come to help a person being stabbed next to his house. What is that? And what happened at the end here was that people came, a kitat konenut, which you can translate.
Yeah, it's like you can think of it as like a citizen's watch, or like sort of a local organization of people that are licensed to to use firearms, and then in a sense like a neighborhood watch. They can either go out just to scout the street or be available in case there's something happens that needs immediate reaction.
And they're usually coordinated with the army or with the police or whatever. I mean, it's totally a legit thing. It's not as spontaneous.
Yeah, it's not a bunch of not a bunch of
exactly.
like Batman, that's going around,
no vigilantes here.
No vigilantes, yeah.
Yes, they're totally part of the system of protection.
Yes.
So what happened is those units from some of the villages and settlements that need them more than us came with all their gear and protected our neighborhood.
Wow.
And they saved us. So the reason why we were okay then was because of all those. And in the meantime, we in our neighborhood itself, as everyone's a military man here, created our own unit and how to protect our own neighborhood. And so bringing it back to nowadays is the second the war started, our neighborhood was already up and running our war room. We literally have a war room in one of the buildings, social hall, like the neighborhood little room. And they have the screens up, and we have the volunteers watching and patrolling, and we have the gear, and everything is up and running because it was up and running back then, and because we know we know what it's like to be in that situation. So, and we don't have a choice, and we know that our neighbors are not going to be friendly to us.
Yeah.
In Lod, one of the big um, uh, famous photos was of um, the Arabs in the city, the Arab Israelis in Lod, climbing up and taking down the Israeli flag and putting up a Palestinian flag. Um, so we don't have any illusions that it's going to be any different this time. So we know we have to protect ourselves.
Yeah. So really, what has been happening in Lod? Like, I haven't heard of any kind
Nothing.
of and and do
Except for
you
the
get it?
Muazzin.
And so what? Like, do you other than I can hypothesize as to why
Mm.
you're not seeing anything going on in Lod, but I'd much rather hear it from somebody there. Like, can you tell me? Is it that you feel that there's a bunch of things that could be happening, right? One thing could be that the fact that
Right.
Israel is showing so much force, in Gaza is deterring people from trying something, the same way. Another possibility is that places like Lod, maybe, something has shifted. People don't want a repeat of what happened there, even on the Arab side, and they're actually the more moderate forces are putting their efforts are doing it. Are there like, you know, is there more
I have
dialogue
no
that's going
clue.
on? Do you have an idea why it's more stable this time?
I have no clue. I really have no clue. And unfortunately, I have no dialogue with any uh, Arab Israelis in Lod, which is part of the thing.
Yeah.
I mean, there might be. I'm assuming there's some reasons, but I personally have no clue why it's different.
Yeah. Well,
I think one thing that I
one thing
am
I've
picking up
heard.
on. Mhm.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm saying just not in terms of Lod, but in general, is that there's different. Um, and I could be totally wrong, but my sense is that the Arabs in different places in the country like or dislike the other Arabs in the different places. And so I wonder, and maybe I'm totally off, but like working at and studying at Hebrew U, I could tell that there were the Arabs from even around Jerusalem didn't like the Arabs of the other neighborhoods or whatever, or of the Arabs in Hebron are different than the Arabs from Silwan, are different from the Arabs from Nasrat, are different from the Arabs in Gaza, and I wonder if that also has something to do with it.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
I guess I'll say two things about that. The first thing is that it's definitely true that the Arabs are, very, their clan, let's say, or family, like units are much more, are better, let's say, uh, frame of reference to analyze their patterns rather than, let's say, the nation, because for all sorts of cultural reasons. Um, we also know that religion plays a big deal in this, and there's Shiite Muslims versus Sunni Muslims, and a lot of
yeah.
things that cause a lot of strain within the Arab population when they try to act in a unified manner, which they hardly do. But the other thing I'll say is that I at least saw one Arab commentator, Israeli Arab commentator, say that the fact that Israel is reacting strongly towards anybody who tries to incite at the moment, and there have been, like, it started, there were a few small things at the beginning, people using footage from the Hamas atrocities, as like, just like posting it on social media or putting it up in their stores. And there was a very strong reaction by the Israeli forces that's helping, not that alone is deterring, but it's also helping the moderate forces within the Arab community to rein people in. In other words, you're not the cool kid on the block. If the moment you're trying to riot everybody else, people start, people around you start getting hurt. It's or being locked away. It's easier for the more moderate voices to speak when the Israeli armed forces show, like, a strong show of force towards those who try to incite. And I mentioned this before on this podcast, that I think that that's part of the challenge of living in the Middle East, is that you want to probably also the challenge of being in Europe nowadays. You want to adopt a open, free society kind of outlook, that, and you'd like that to be that's something that everybody can use. But for that, people have to share some sort of core set of values. And then when you meet people that don't share your core values, of course, the extreme version of that is what Hamas did, which is just monstrosity. Um, you can't apply those rules, right? You have to show a different side of you in order to put them to keep them at bay.
Last question. The last thing you said.
No, I said that one of the challenges Israel has is that it's one of these things you also, I think, learn as a parent sometimes, right? That you need to show force in order for
Yeah.
there to be peace, and
Yeah.
it's one of those things. Um, yeah, so I think we're going to start wrapping up in a moment. I was wondering if there's anything else you wanted to share, maybe about, about how your kids are doing. How are you managing after weeks of your husband being away with small visits to
Yeah.
house? Like, where do you
That's,
where do you see yourself right now?
uh, we found our new normal, which is kind of sad. Um, it, like I see, I feel like my duty is to rise to the occasion. Not just my duty, that's my desire, is to rise to the occasion. I keep thinking back on my grandparents, on the Holocaust, and people got through things, and that's, I guess, my turn to do that. So that's how I sort of look at myself, and what I need to do in order to keep going for my kids, so that they're not um, traumatized too much. But I do see changes in them, and I see things that make me make me wonder, make me a little concerned. A lot of parents are dealing with behavioral issues with their kids, um, and I mean, thank God that's not what I'm dealing with. Not not to jinx it, but I can clearly my kids are going through something. And I think all kids are going through something just because there's a war. But the fact that their father's not home and he's in the army, they have to contain that somehow. And even though we can tell them a bunch of times that he's fine and he's safe and he's not in the line of fire, he's a reserve. You can frame it in a certain way, but the kids aren't idiots, you know. um, and they're carrying that somehow, and that's actually a discussion that when I get to talk to Hillel for a few minutes a day, um, to be able to discuss that with him and to feel like a co-parent again. So like and then it makes me feel like, okay, I still have a co-parent. I'm still discussing stuff with him. It's not all on me. He's still
Yeah,
involved, and I still need his input, and we're still raising the kids together. Um, so that's sort of like an interesting, like weird thing that I'm like, I need to still have those parenting conversations with him, just like we always have, um, and bring him back into the house, uh, because he's very much not here.
I think it's really important that connection that we maintain with them. I think it's important for them, for morale. They
Mm-hmm.
have to see that we're here. I think it's also because when you're in the army, and I was experiencing this a bit during the Second Lebanese War, when you're in the army, your world becomes very small. Like your world becomes just this little bubble, and you forget very quickly. At least people like me forget very quickly what real normal life looks like.
Yeah.
I met a friend of mine that came down from the north on Friday, so I went to meet him for coffee, and he sits down, and we're talking about this is I think it was 9 o'clock, and he had driven straight from the north down, so he had already had something to eat in the morning. He says to me, "This is a guy you have to understand. Like, imagine a high tech guy. He makes a decent salary. High up in high tech.
Yeah.
And he sits down in this nice coffee shop in the middle of in Ra'anana, which is a nice suburb of Tel Aviv, and he says, "You know what I had for breakfast today?" And I say, "What?" He says, "I took a I took a tuna can. I opened up the tuna can. I folded the tuna top into like a wedge, and I just ate the tuna. That was
Yep.
my breakfast." And you see him looking at the menu, trying to figure out what to eat. And I
Yeah.
totally get that. I've been there before.
Yep.
You're like, what? Like, it's not the same world.
No.
And that connection and maintaining a memory of what normal is so important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Leah, first of all, I mean, this is, of course, a public thing, but I want you to, first of all, thank you for coming to this talk. I know we
Pleasure.
had some connection issues, technical, and I hope that it came out good. We'll see
Yeah.
once I summarize, once I review it. But we should definitely, do another one of these in a few weeks
Sure.
once more things evolve. And um, and yeah, just stay safe, stay
Thank
normal
you.
if
You
you
too.
can.
Yeah. Normal. What's normal? Normal.
I don't know. Israel is not a
Yeah.
normal country, so it's hard to know.
No. No.
Okay, thank you for recording.
All right.
So thank you very much. Bye.
My pleasure. Bye.